What do we need to be aware of when we cold start a plug-in hybrid? They're slightly different to most other cars, and thankfully the manufacturers have put a lot of thought into the design. Are we still going to be paranoid and worried about cold starting and allowing the engine to warm up? Because in your typical plug-in hybrid, you don't get very much control. You can't switch stop start off because it switches to the battery drive system whenever it gets the opportunity or feels that that's favorable. And as a driver, you're very much at the mercy of whatever settings the manufacturers have put in place. This video then is going to look at some of the mitigations to reduce the risks that you would get on older cars or more basic cars when it comes to cold start damage. The big worry of most drivers is driving on a cold engine. Most engine wear occurs within the first few minutes of startup. In fact, studies have shown 5 minutes of driving on a cold engine does about 70% of the overall damage that the engine experiences in its lifetime. And statistics like that are quite shocking and quite horrific. We get into our plug-in hybrid, it tends to drive off on battery power, and then as soon as we reach a highway and we want to use a decent amount of performance, the petrol engine cuts in, often at fairly high RPM. Is that something we should be worried about as a driver? Well, firstly, the plug-in hybrid engine is very well designed. It's very well manufactured. The risks of expansion and contraction of metals has been mitigated as much as is possible in a modern engine through clever choice of metal alloys and the way the engine has been put together and very, very tightly machined. As a result of these tighter tolerances, the manufacturers have had to use thinner oil. You'll often see much thinner oil used on plug-in hybrids than you would in an equivalent non-plug-in hybrid engine. This means that the oil is lubricating very effectively from cold, certainly much more effectively than in some of the other engines that have a thicker oil. They're also designed to build oil pressure much more quickly. In the case of the plug-in hybrid that I purchased fairly recently, I've noticed that once the engine cuts in, it warms up. It gets to about 65, 70 degrees centigrade before it even cycles the stop-start system. And that was my big worry. If I bought this car, would the engine be switching off when the engine was still cold and never really getting up to temperature? Well, thankfully, that's been mitigated and sorted out. We do see the engine getting up to temperature. Now, manufacturers have designed various systems to maintain the engine temperature. Even when the engine is off, there are thermos storage units, if you like, for the coolant or the oil. It'll depend a lot on the manufacturer's design, but they've thought about keeping as much heat in the engine as possible. And you will find that your typical plug-in hybrid runs most of the time about 60, 65 degrees. The oil temperature only gets up to 90 degrees, the favoured temperature, which most would regard as a fully warmed up engine. When you do spirited driving or long runs on the motorway, most of the time it's in a narrower temperature operating range, and that really means the manufacturers have targeted that. They've optimized the engine to run at these slightly cooler temperatures. It's also impossible to rev really hard your modern plug-in hybrid engine when the engine is cold. There are lots of safety systems in place to hold back the power and the performance until the engine is up to temperature. Effectively, you can view that engine computer as a granny looking after you, making sure that you're not overly abusive to your engine. So it takes a lot of the worry out of driving a modern engine. But some people still don't like the idea of an engine that is running cold most of the time, or cool, I should say, and it's stopping and starting quite regularly. But what do the actual statistics and figures show? Well, some of the brands that have used plug-in hybrids and hybrid technology for many years, Toyota and Lexus are obviously at the tip of my tongue. They're the biggest manufacturer out there of the hybrid engine, and they've had many years to refine the designs and the way it works. Well, they're still among some of the most reliable engines around. And in many of those, you don't get the option of switching off the stop-start function. You don't get the option of controlling when the engine is on for the warm-up cycle. The car takes control of that. I'd be really interested to know what your experience is, and particularly the year of your car. Is this something that just applies to the more recent models, or is it something that has applied to hybrids from Toyota for the last 20 odd years, or since they've been making them? When you send oil off for oil analysis on a hybrid engine, you will see lower fuel dilution. That's a big problem on conventional combustion engines, especially if they're driven on short journeys and cold most of the time. And that also equates to lower viscosity breakdown. The oil still performs quite well when it comes for oil change time than in a conventional combustion engine that has been subject to a lot of cold starts and a lot of short trips. We've also got to bear in mind that the combustion engine is not doing all of the work. In the typical lifespan of your plug-in hybrid, the electric motor will be doing, say, half of the miles, and the petrol engine will be doing the other half. And if you're looking at a car that has done 100,000 miles, only 50,000 of that, if the ratio is correct for you, would have been done on the combustion engine. And effectively, you've got two engines, two units. The wear and tear is spread evenly among the two. So overall, in answer to the question on this video, we don't have to worry too much about cold starts and warming up a hybrid engine because the manufacturers have done that for us. We're in a system that has been fairly carefully designed. It's quite hard to push it too hard and cause problems or damage to the engine. Please let me know what your experience has been of driving a plug-in hybrid. Do you find that the engine warms up and stays warm for long periods of time? Do you find it annoying where it switches between the electric and the petrol engine? And if you can select electric and petrol drive, do you do so? Which is your preferred mode of operation most of the time? Thanks for watching. Please boot that like button if you found this video useful. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. That helps us to get out there. And I've lined up this video and this playlist that you should find really interesting. Thanks for watching. See you in these next videos.